This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
I'm Tom Hoppe, and I'm your host of the Most Painful Podcast. Welcome to the Most Painful Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Hoppe. Well, it's February 2024, and we're starting Season 4. I'd like to thank you, the listeners from Canada, US, Europe, UK, and Australia, for your support of the show. Your feedback has helped develop the show and define the topics that are important to you. And we've received several responses on how the information of the show has helped people. For example, on Season 3, Episode 7 with Leroy Ho, we were talking about strength training when you have chronic pain. And Wilford Poe mentioned how the analogy of a cup being full was helpful to understand not to push too hard when you're in pain. As well, Daniel Chernov also found the information helpful and helped with his strength training. Having said that, we have some excellent episodes coming up in Season 4. For example, we got hypnosis for post-surgical pain, how to prepare for surgery for better outcomes, supplements to help with pain with Dr. Andrea Ferlin, trauma-informed yoga with Lori Taylor, and many more topics. So keep tuning in and hit the subscribe and share button. And today we're going to talk about what an OT's role is. So when you're struggling with pain, what does an occupational therapist do to help people in their well-being when they're struggling with pain? Today on the show, I'm joined by John Secen, who is an OT at the DeGroote Pain Centre in Hamilton, Ontario. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom, for having me.
Great to have you on. And also joining us is John Brown, who's a veteran, and he'll share his story of how an OT can help people with pain. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tom. Good to see you again.
Good. So John and John, I've seen you guys. I've seen this presentation at the stakeholders meeting in Vancouver, and I thought it was great, and I'm glad you guys take the time to come on the show. So John Secen, maybe you can start us off and kind of get us into what your role is and how that helps people with chronic pain.
Thanks, Tom. Sounds good. So I'm an occupational therapist at the DeGroote Pain Clinic, and it's a two-part role. So the first, as an occupational therapist, essentially what we're concerned about is functioning and helping our veterans improve their day-to-day functioning, improving their quality of life. So, one hat or one lens is that unique OT role in terms of improving functioning there. The OT in my position currently is a part of a bigger team, a interdisciplinary team consisting of physicians, pharmacists, social workers, dietitian, etc. And it's a bigger team, a collaborative approach to help veterans improve their quality of life, increase daily functioning, and take sort of a more holistic or comprehensive approach to pain versus the traditional medical model, which is, if you can sort of treat the underlying tissues and you can relieve the symptoms. So here we're looking at a team approach to addressing the different multifaceted issues that people with chronic pain face.
And when you say team approach, I know it's team within in interdisciplinary care, which we've had a podcast on about what interdisciplinary care is or pain clinic is compared to a regular physio or chiro. But when you're talking team, that's one side of the team. I guess the other side of the team is the patient as well.
Of course, yes. So, one of the main features here is that it's never just a bunch of professionals saying, listen to us, and the vet has no input in their care. And so, it's a collaborative approach here in terms of wanting to know what's important to the vet when they come into our programs, regardless if it's just being able to get better doing household chores, learning specific strategies of pain management, or being able to do, returning to recreational activities. So across the spectrum of basic self-care tasks to the other end of the spectrum, where getting those quality of life activities, whatever it may be, outdoor activities, indoor activities, being able to be social again, it's a broad scope there.
Right. Yeah. So I guess John Brown, when you were on the other side of the team as a veteran coming into the clinic, maybe you can talk a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, it was great having, you had lots of professionals, like the whole team environment. Like they didn't give you back in the Army, you heard you were given a regimen of what you had to do, and that was it, right? And you had to follow whatever they told you. However, this team approach is where they give you lots of options to see what tailor-made for each individual, right? They gave me a ton of options on how to deal with my chronic pain and what would be best, and actually be able to try it and see what works best for me. I mean, it doesn't fit for everyone, so you have to find that nice balance in between the therapies, right? Like from bike riding or yoga or whatever you find for that kind of pain, enjoyment.
And when you talk about those different modalities, or I guess, like you said, John Secen, is to get back to functionality, is to get back moving. How is that process determined? So, I mean, you and John work together, I guess we, as you talked about in the conference, but how do we start that process when John comes into the clinic and meets you? Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, so generally speaking, there's a little bit of an intake or a little bit of an assessment. So wanting to know, we have OT specific tools to kind of help identify goals in the beginning. So that's, I think, the first step. No point doing a plan for John to do, jet skiing, for example, if he's never been on water, right? So the main idea here is, direct veteran communication. What's important to you? What's your why? What do you want to get out of a program like this? John has had a few examples, which I'm not sure we can talk about, which we'll talk about later on. But I think just identifying the why. So the question we always like to ask is, if you can learn how to manage your pain in a different way, what are those activities you want to do? And then once we identify those activities, then we can start looking at what are the barriers to participating in those why activities. And then we can look at breaking down those barriers and getting back to returning to those activities, albeit in a different way than some of the mindsets that I'm sure we'll talk about later, or some of the sort of activity approaches that get in the way with veterans with chronic pain in completing those activities.
Yeah, and I mean, as we're having this conversation amongst us, like, John Brown, when you're hearing that, if you reflect back on to coming into the clinic, what could you add anything to that from a patient's perspective?
Yeah, definitely. When I got there, I took the course about 5 years ago. And at that time, I was really dealing heavily with chronic pain. It was overtaking me, and I was incapable of doing a lot of stuff. And my main goal was to spend more time with my family. I've got 4 kids right now. The age range from 10 to 20. So, 5-6 years ago, they were considerably younger. It was harder to keep up with them. And I would push myself. I had the good military pushing mindset of getting the task done at all costs, right? So I would play with the kids and everything else like that, and push myself through to taskings and get it through. But then I would be laid up on the couch for 2 or 3 or 4 days, and then have to set it over and do it all over again following that. So when I got to the clinic, right, I learned all about the pushing mindset that's been ingrained in me since I was a little kid, all the way through the military, and I never let that go. Right, if you quit, it was a sign of weakness. We were always taught, but then I learned how to manage my pain, and actually, because the method I was using obviously wasn't working for me, because the more you pushed, the longer you'd be out of action for, and you get back into it, and became a vicious cycle. So thankfully, they gave me the tools on how to stop that and actually get out and participate with my kids. It's not for as many hours as it is, but it's the quality time that I got instead of quantity.
Yeah, and I guess when we talk about pushing through, the military mindset is a bit unique to that. And we hear that a lot with veterans. We also hear it in the athlete world. So, John Secen, how do you deal with that when you're having veterans? Or maybe you can elaborate a little more on the mindset from your point of view.
Of course, yes. So when we meet veterans coming into your program, and we want to ask the question of, are you a pusher or are you a pacer? And the pushing mindset, of course, as John Brown described, are some of those old adages you hear. Once you start a task, you have to push on through, push beyond your pain to get the job done and deal with the consequences later. Unfortunately, those consequences, we hear the pain flare-ups last days, weeks, months, if not, longer. So that mindset is not really conducive to, high quality life or being able to make it through the day with reduced pain. Some of the other mindset things we hear is, suck it up, push on in, Larry the Cable Guy, get her done, that philosophy there. Sure. So there is this all or none mindset, or part of the pushing mindset here, where this idea that there's nobility, there's strength in being able to finish what you start all in one shot. This idea that once you start something, it had to be finished yesterday without any pauses, any breaks, because if you do pause or if you do break, it may mean you're lazy. It may mean you're not noble. So the first step, we ask is, where are you on that spectrum of being a pusher and having to deal with some of these messages versus the opposite is, what we call the pacing mindset. And all that really is learning how to do things for your nervous system, how to do things for your body and mind while you're doing a task. So instead of job first, consequences later, it becomes, a parallel process of doing things for your body or mind while you're doing the task. So there's sort of a simple shift in that philosophy and that thinking can be the difference between completing a task within your tolerances and your limits versus going overboard and then dealing with those consequences days, months, weeks on end.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about the military mindset and, it's not even knowing what the language is, like pacing. When I first heard the word pacing, I thought someone was going to run beside me. I didn't realize it was, to slow down. I'm sure, John Brown, you can probably relate to that.
I totally can, right? I mentioned pitching the beads when you're out marching, right? It used to be my thing of pacing, right? Okay, well, how quick of a march are we doing? Right? So,
yeah, and so when we look at the mindset, I mean, John Brown, because we know with veterans, and we look at the research, veterans do actions that they're not aware of because it's just so normal in life.
It is. I'll give you a prime example. When I first got to DeGroote Pain Management, one of the first tasks they had me to do was just to take a walk around the main floor and to stop when I started to feel pain. I did almost a whole lap, and the person that was walking me through it stopped me and asked me why I was still walking. I said, well, I'm not feeling any pain. And she looked at me and said, well, why are you limping? And I hadn't even realized I was limping. It was just normal day-to-day activity for me. So you have that pushing mindset to get it done, to get the task done, right? Like, we trained our whole lives for it, and we came through it, and it was helpful to get the job done that we needed to in the tasks. But later on in life, right, when you're dealing with chronic pain and stuff, getting the lawn mowed in one afternoon is not a top priority. And, I was putting it, oh no, it's got to get done, or you're lazy, or you're broken, or, that kind of stuff, or you go play basketball with your kid, even if your knee gives out, right? You keep on it, and then you'd be laid up on the couch. But you got the task done. So it took a long time for me personally, to adjust that behavior, because I'd get halfway through it and take a break. And I'm like, you hear that inner voice saying, get up and finish the job. You're not finished yet. What are you doing? Right. And still to this day, it's been, 5 or 6 years, and I still hear that voice every once in a while. Right. I'd live the bike ride and that kind of stuff and be like, just one more kilometer. Right. And it's like, no, I'm done. Right. So yeah, it's interesting that we have that pushing mindset to get it done and get the task complete. But yeah.
Yeah. And I can appreciate that, because I mean, even, with all the involvement in research and in identity and that, I still have that issue if I'm on a hike or something. It's like your mind goes somewhere else, and it's a light switch. You just keep going, even though one should know better, right? So I guess, John Brown, how did you learn to change? Like, what was if you can think back to when you came into the clinic, and it might be a number of things, but what was kind of the main thing that made you aware or to change to be a better pacer versus a pusher?
I think the big thing for me was when I got there, my main goal was to be able to participate more in my kids' lives and do more activities with them. And one of them included going to Canada's Wonderland, right? I had gone there before, and we spent all day there. And by the end of the day, Grumpy Dad had appeared, right? I had that long drive home, and it was a lot of pain and agony, right? And, the kids had an okay time, wasn't the greatest time, right? And so when I got to the clinic and they were teaching all this pacing mindset, I thought, I'm going to give it a try, right? It was about halfway through the 4-week program, and I took my kids there, all 4 of them. And I thought, okay, I'll do it. I'll give the example and give it a shot and see how it works. And instead of spending the whole day there, we only spent 4 hours, and I warned the kids ahead of time, this is what's going to happen, right? And we'll leave. And they ended up having, and so did I, one of the best times we've ever had together. They talk about the trip, because I would actually take breaks. The kids would go off and do their thing, and they came back, and I didn't leave right at the end of the day. I left when I was still feeling good. I still had a 2-hour drive to get home, right? In that pushing mindset. And then once I clued in, I had happy kids. I was happy. We got home, and I was like, this stuff really works. It's that's the switch for me that hit it. I'm like, okay, let's see what else is going to try, right? Then I expanded into yoga and everything else I was honestly afraid of trying, or back in the army days, we'd be criticized for doing those type of activities.
Yeah, and I mean, John Secen, I mean, if you, what are the processes that you use to get someone to be aware of pacing versus pushing?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. So we've been doing some of these group education sessions, and as I've done more of these group education sessions, you always hear about the yeah but and the bears of pacing, and for instance, more in the civilian population, sort of, John, I'm self-employed, time is money, and I don't have time to pace. Or we've had some parents in the classroom going, John, I have 3 kids. What do you mean taking a break in the middle of of raising kids? Like, I can't do that. And as time went on, I kind of had to say, okay, like, what do these two groups of people have in common with each other in terms of pacing and pushing? And, the answer was, at some point, regardless if you're self-employed or you're a parent, at some point you're going to have to go and use the washroom and relieve yourself of, your bowel and bladder movements. And in a way, that's a form of pacing. That's a form of self-care. And so we started to expand upon that theme a little bit, and when you ask these individuals, it's like, well, what happens when you need to go? Do you have a catheter? Are you wearing a diaper? Or do you learn to pause, remove yourself for 30 seconds or 2 minutes or a couple of minutes, take care of your body, and then go back to your task? And I've yet to meet one person who says that, yeah, John, I'm wearing a diaper to be there for my kids 24/7, or I'm wearing a diaper, while I'm at work. And the main message here is, okay, this is where I create the term micro pausing, and it's just like you step outside for 30 seconds or 2 minutes to take care of your body. How about we expand upon what you're already doing, and while you're at work or while you're a parent, where do you find 30 seconds? Where do you find a couple of minutes to, instead of push on through, pause and do something for your body, or do something for your mind, do something for your nervous system? So some, kind of the 4 pacing skills we teach in the program: learning how to take 5 deep breaths in and deep breaths out, because that only takes, a minute or 2. Maybe it's doing a specific physiotherapy or mobility exercise or a stretch. You don't have to do your full 20, 30-minute workout every time, but maybe it's just, selecting 1 or 2 exercises and doing 1 set of 10 as opposed to 3 sets of 10 there. So breathing, mobility, learning how to alternate between different positions, sitting and standing, as opposed to doing 100% of your task in standing. And then I always like to joke, there is a component of self-care. There is a component of rest. Regardless if you think listening to Metallica or AC/DC or Celine Dion is relaxing, it is, encouraging you to, while you're mowing the lawn, take 5-10 minutes and put on something that's going to make you feel good, as opposed to, again, that old mindset of sucking it up, pushing on through, getting the job done. And then your body lets you know, hey, you didn't do anything for me while you're doing this task. So now we're going to be having, increased pain beyond the task completion and afterwards.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're saying that, what, kind of pops in my mind, I don't know, John Brown, if it's the same for you. But is just, 1 is awareness, and 2 is just calming your system down. I mean, we've had a number of episodes on this podcast talking about breath work and calming your central nervous system down to help calm your pain down. So that's really what I'm hearing from you, John Secen, right?
Right. Yeah. So essentially, again, breaking free from that. Once you start something, you have to see it through task completion. And I think good pacing education is just that simple switch for doing things for your mind, your body, your nervous system while you're doing a task, as opposed to the mindset of, I'm going to get the job done first, and then maybe I'll do that breath work, or I'll do that stretch, or I'll do my physiotherapy later. And then you finish the task and it turns out, you've overdone it. And that promise to yourself doesn't get met. And, unfortunately, we're stuck in that negative feedback cycle of pain. We call it the good day, bad day cycle, where you're living life either recovering from a recent pain flare-up or on the other side of the coin, overdoing it when you're feeling better. And what we want to do is teach any good pacing education is giving you that middle ground back, learning when your pain levels are higher, what are some gentle exercises or things you can do for your body, mind, and nervous system when your pain levels are higher. But then also on the other end, learning when your pain levels are lower and you're feeling better, how not to be Superman, Superwoman, or super person and trying to get everything done all in one shot, trying to, get everything done yesterday. So teaching you those strategies to slow down and work smarter, not harder when you are feeling better, so that window of opportunity lasts a little bit longer. And when you can make that window of opportunity last a little bit longer, when you don't cross those pain tolerances or physical tolerances, you feel better throughout the week. And those flare-ups, if you do have flare-ups, are reduced in intensity and frequency.
Yeah, and I mean, that all makes sense. So I guess my last question for the show goes to John Brown. And this is all good information, but how do you remind yourself and stay on track? I mean, we're all humans and we have days where we're going to follow the program and days where we're not, but how do you overall keep yourself on track?
Yeah, it's a good reminder. My body will physically remind me to keep on track. So there's days where, you're not feeling it. You don't want to get up to go to the gym. You don't want to go do that bike ride or go to do that yoga class. And you spend a day or two on the couch, and then your body, well, at least mine anyway, starts to seize up, and you think, and you start, your mind starts to wonder. It's like you get a little depressed or whatnot, right? And you get the physical pain going. It's like, when was the last time you exercised? When was the last time you moved your body? And even if it's only for 10 or 15 minutes, you have to keep it moving. And so I'll have to do a check-in with myself. And it's like, okay, my knees are hurting. Well, why? And it'd be like, when was the last time you rode? When was the last time you went for a walk? And if it was a couple of days, go out and go do it, even if it's just 10 minutes, right? I've learned now that instead of pushing through, is it a life or death situation? No. Then I don't need to push through and get the job done right there and then. I can pace it out and get it done eventually, right? It's on my time. So I've learned that in the breathing techniques, it's been wonderful to get through that, to reset the mind, to bring you down at a calmer spot so you can see, okay, can this task be done in pieces? Can I break this down and do it? So that's my main reminder, is my body will actually say, hey, you need to slow down, because if you don't, this pain is going to increase, and I don't want that happening, right? We want to learn how to live with it. And, instead of it managing me, right, I can manage it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to sum this up. I mean, all the work that John Secen has done, with the education piece, and then of course you learning and sharing your story, I think has been very helpful today. I always walk away from each episode learning something. Really. And so I'm grateful you guys took the time to be on the show. So I'd like to thank both John Secen and John Brown for being on the show.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you so much for inviting us, Tom.
Yeah. So for the audience, I know, I always say we could keep talking longer because we just get into the meat of this and it's time to wrap up. But if you're interested in more topics, then subscribe to the program. And we have, about 30 some odd topics on different information on different types of treatments for pain and even identity and mindset. So on the next show, we're going to talk about hypnosis as an opioid sharing adjunct treatment for pain relief. That should be an interesting topic. So for feedback about the show or for more information on chronic pain, you can visit our website at veteranschronicpain.ca or follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Chronic Pain COE and on Instagram, chronicpain_COE. So John and John, thanks for being on the show. And for the audience, stay safe and keep the hope alive.
The Most Painful Podcast is produced for the Chronic Pain Centre of Excellence by Story Studio Network.